What's up, legends? The Illuminates have evolved. Yesterday, alongside with the new weapon customization update, several new Illuminate enemies were released, and so for the sake of science for Super Earth, I sat my butt down for several hours shooting at these different enemy types and wrote down notes on how they perform, how to counter them, and any sort of tips that may be of use to us when dealing with these new units. So without any further ado, let's not beat it around the bush and let's go over 17 quick tips when it comes to dealing with the new Illuminate faction enemies. First, let's start off with the Fleshmob. That's the official name for it apparently, so let's stick with that. I know people have different names for it, but yeah. The Fleshmob has a very low armor value of 1. What this means is that literally every single weapon in the game will deal damage to it at its full value. So armor penetration is not really something that you have to concern yourself with when dealing with these flesh mobs. The flesh mobs have a meaty health pool though. I've estimated somewhere easily over 2,000 to 3,000 health, as they're able to survive attacks from even a thermite, which deals nearly 3,000 damage in total when including its fire damage. Now until that exact number is data mined though, we can only estimate the health. The flesh mob is indeed meant to be the bullet sponge enemy on the Illuminate side of things, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have a weak spot. Much like every other enemy in Helldivers 2, it does have a weak spot, although I'll say it's quite challenging to use its weak spot to your advantage. The weak spot on the flesh mob is going to be the glowing blue eyes. If you destroy nearly all of its blue spots, it will instantly kill the flesh mob after that. So the most ammo efficient way to deal with them is to blow up the heads on its front, dodge its charge, and then shoot some heads on its back for a quick kill. There are, however, quite a few weapons that will, of course, thrive against the flesh mob. For example, they're pretty vulnerable to fire damage, and weapons that deal AoE damage, such as the Scorcher and the crossbow, are excellent at taking them out without much effort. Some players are also under the impression that it is effective to kill them by shooting their legs, but personally I'll have to disagree. This is a pretty challenging way to kill these flesh mobs, and it still takes a tremendous amount of shots to kill. And even though it is indeed faster than just shooting at its center mass, personally I'd avoid taking this approach, as there are far more effective ways to dealing with them. The flesh mobs are pretty resistant, but not immune to stuns and stagger. I wouldn't rely on stagger against these big guys, and personally I just recommend hitting them with something that kills them quickly, which we'll look at here in a second. But before we do, I must mention melee weapons absolutely blow ass against flesh mobs, and weapons such as the stun lance can basically not even stun the flesh mobs due to its stun resistance. And honestly, that kind of makes me feel that maybe that flag stratagem that's coming up on the next war bond is coming at a pretty awkward time. Now, you do not one-shot flesh mobs with thermites or recoilless rifles, even if you attempt to shoot at its legs. These meaty ball sacks are just far too tanky. But now, let's go ahead and take a look at what does perform really well against these flesh mobs. Overall, from my testing, some great weapon choices against the flesh mobs are going to be the Scorcher, the Purifier, the Eruptor, and the Crossbow for primary weapons. For secondary weapons, I recommend the Crisper, as the fire is very effective against them as well. And for support weapons, we've got a few weapons that truly shine. For example, the Wasp can pretty much kill it instantly with a quick 4-shot flurry, and the autocannon is also remarkably good at killing them as well. And of course, any weapon that can just deal a sustained amount of very fast DPS will be really good at chewing through them as well, such as the machine gun, heavy machine gun, flamethrower, etc. You can simplify fighting these units by just nuking the shit out of them with any of these weapons. It's just not the most ammo efficient way, but yeah, it sure as hell works. Now moving away from flesh mobs, let's take a look at the Crescent Overseers. There's not a great deal to talk about here, as these Crescent Overseers work pretty much the exact same as any other Overseers in many areas. For example, they'll have the same armor and the same health pool as the elevated Overseers or any of the other Overseers. So anything that worked against Overseers will work against these Crescent Overseers as well. The only difference between these enemies is going to be the way these new Overseers attack. Now, the Crescent Overseers have 3 sets of attack. One is the Long Range Mortar, which has a very small AoE, and it's meant to be more of a poke damage, and it can snipe you out if you're not careful, much like the Bile Spewer but the AoE is much smaller. Now, if you do move within its medium range from it, it will take shots at you with its weapon, kind of like a blast type of attack, which is fairly inaccurate, but if it does hit you, it does hit kind of hard. It'll do about 60 to 70% of your health on light armor. And lastly, if you get even closer, he'll give you a nice knuckle sandwich and drop you on your ass. So yeah, you don't want to be trying to fist fight these guys. Generally speaking though, for Crescent Overseers, just keep an eye out on the sky, and if you find mortars being shot towards your direction, just find their location and kill them as soon as possible, so you don't have to keep worrying about looking up and you don't find yourself getting sniped out by them the same way you don't want to get sniped out by a biospewer on the Terminid side. Now, as for the Stingrays or interlopers, I mean, the devs call it Stingrays, but in game, when you die to them, it says interlopers, so I don't really know. I'll call them Stingrays, as it's easier to pronounce that. But yeah, Stingrays have an armor value of 3, which all things considered is quite low and pretty easy to deal with. And these jet-like units are actually fairly easy to kill with the right weapons. They are, however, extremely deadly. I kind of see them as a little bit of a glass cannon type enemy. As for the Stingray attacks, they'll light the floor blue several seconds before the strike, giving you a little bit of time to dive away from their fire. You can also hide from their attack by hiding behind walls and ledges to avoid damage from their directional strike. So yeah, that's kind of good to know. It doesn't just magically hit you even though you're behind a wall. So yeah, use that to your advantage. The Stingrays will expose themselves the most when they're about to strike, as they hover midair for a few seconds, giving you a very small window of opportunity to unleash damage onto them. Just make sure though that you get out of their path first before doing so. And as they release their strike, they also kind of move at like a manageable speed. So if you can track that target well enough, you can unleash some damage onto them. Now, as far as best weapons go for dealing with Stingrays, I'd say once again, the Wasp is the best weapon for them. A couple of shots with its lock-on mechanic will make quick work of these fighter jets. But also, AMRs and autocannons using flak ammo will work wonders against these units. It'll just require a little bit more aiming. And lastly, I should note that their health pool isn't really that large, so realistically you could kind of use any weapon you want as long as it has armor penetration 3 and above, and yeah, you're going to be dealing a decent amount of damage to them. Speaking on its health pool, it's estimated that the Stingrays have less than 2,000 health, as weapons such as the expendable anti-tanks, recoilless rifles, and others do one-shot these units. However, it is kind of a challenge to do so. It's also worth noting that the Stingrays can also deal friendly fire damage, so if you're not too bothered by just dodging their attacks, it may be worthwhile leaving them alive and utilizing their attacks to help you thin out the hordes of Voltluses around you. So that's about it for the tips on these new Illuminate enemies. That's about as much relevant information as I gathered from my experiments as well as online resources. What I will say though is that overall now against the Illuminates, we continue to not really have to worry about much anti-tank weapons, and we can get away pretty comfortably with low armor penetrating weapons, which personally I find really cool. These new enemy types are going to make the Wasp launcher a lot better against the Illuminates, as well as autocannon and of course the machine guns as well. So if you're not big on using those support weapons, now is definitely the time to do so. Now, I hope this video was useful to some of you guys, and I'll be catching you legends on the next one. Peace.